Every building has a story to tell. This building has enough stories to fill a book. Within these walls lie stories of soul-stirring triumph and joy, and echoes of great tragedy. Stories of reverence and profound faith. Tales of the great and mighty, and tales of the simple and poor. For this is God's house. America's Cathedral, the Baltimore Basilica. The Basilica of the National Shrine of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. This is Maryland, a place of tolerance and hope, a land of new beginnings. This extraordinary building is as much a national monument as it is a testament to the faith of millions. Consecrated in the earliest days of the Republic, its roots go back much further to a dark time, when religious wars spread death and intolerance across the face of Europe, when priests were hunted down and murdered, and terrified Catholics were forced to worship in secret.
Being a Catholic was unpatriotic. It was designated as being almost treasonous because you still had your religious allegiance to Rome and not to Canterbury.
In 1634, George Calvert, the first Lord Baltimore, established the colony of Maryland as a place of refuge for his fellow Catholics.
He was born a Protestant, but became a Catholic, returned to the old faith, and he had the idea of a land of sanctuary in the New World where there wouldn't be this religious molestation. And so he began colonies. The first one was in Newfoundland. The climate was too hostile. And then he got a grant for the upper Chesapeake. And he didn't live to see it, but his son lived to see it, Cecil Calvert. And his brother Leonard Calvert led the first colonists to Maryland in the Ark and the Dove in 1634.
Here, it was hoped, Catholics and others could practice their faith openly and without fear of persecution. In 1649, these freedoms were incorporated into Maryland's Act of Toleration. But soon after, anti-Catholic legislation stemming from England canceled many of those freedoms, and by 1704, public worship was forbidden to Catholics. Catholic schools were outlawed, and Catholics were barred from holding public office or military commissions, and were subjected to double taxation. Once again, Catholics were forced underground, worshiping secretly in so-called mass houses, deliberately disguised to look like ordinary buildings.
Some of those still stand. Priest Neal's Mass House up in Harford County was a lovely house, and the long hallway was where they would hold Mass, and the people would come in from the highways and byways to attend Mass there when the priest was there. Priest Neal was one of a huge family of priests. The Neals were perhaps 8 or 9 different priests in that family, and they served everywhere from Alexandria up into that section of the world. But there's another one on the eastern shore at Cordova, St. Joseph's in Cordova, that from the road looks like a house, but when you ride around the back, you can see that it's a church. So there was all this sort of cat and mouse things that Catholics in the colonial era had to play to survive.
And then, across the eastern seaboard of North America, swept the winds of revolution, culminating in the first immortal document of the young republic, the Declaration of Independence. Boldly signing for Maryland was its most prominent Catholic.
Gentlemen, there is no turning back now, nor should we wish there to be. Charles Carroll of Carrollton.
The Carroll family served prominently throughout the war. John Carroll, a Catholic priest and a close friend of Benjamin Franklin and George Washington, served in diplomatic posts during the conflict. After the war, John Carroll's brother was a signer of the Constitution.
It is an honor indeed to be party to such an enterprise. Daniel Carroll.
With the adoption of the Bill of Rights, the United States formally guaranteed freedom of worship. The Lord Baltimore dream was finally a reality.
The prospect of national prosperity now before us is truly inspiring. And may the Roman Catholics in America, animated alone by the pure spirit of Christianity, enjoy every temporal and spiritual felicity. George Washington, President of the United States.
In 1789, the same year the Bill of Rights was debated and passed, Pope Pius VI created the Diocese of Baltimore, with John Carroll as its first bishop. His diocese served the entire new country, and with the addition of the Louisiana Purchase in 1804, reached all the way from the eastern seaboard to the Rocky Mountains. Such a diocese called for a cathedral to match its grandeur. And as always, Bishop Carroll's vision was breathtakingly bold.
The location was terribly important. It was outside the city limits originally, on this cathedral hill, and a marvelous location. And you could see it from the harbor, so the immigrants coming up the harbor could see this wonderful church sitting on the hill here. Had been part of Howard's Woods. They bought the property, but it wasn't the first property they bought. They bought something down by the water and let that go and bought this premier property for this grand church.
The bishop chose as his architect Benjamin Henry Latrobe, chief architect of the new Capitol rising in Washington and close friend of Thomas Jefferson. These men would shape and influence the design of a unique, new kind of cathedral for a unique, new kind of nation. When Latrobe offered a traditional Gothic design, the bishop deliberately turned away from it.
The Gothic style has great beauty and spiritual strength, but it speaks to the past. Our cathedral should share the perspective of the new American nation. It will speak to the future in the neoclassic style of the national capital in Washington. John Carroll, Bishop of Baltimore.
Like the Capitol, the cathedral would be centered around a rotunda, as in ancient Rome. Jefferson, an important architect himself, urged Latrobe to add windows to the cathedral's rotunda to bring light into the interior.
An oculus might indeed prove impractical in our climate, but a glass-covered opening could provide the building with a most welcome additional source of light, as well as forming a dramatic visual linkage to the ancient republics. Thomas Jefferson.
Latrobe at first demurred, but finally came around to Jefferson's suggestion. The result was breathtaking. Natural sunlight flooded the interior, highlighting details that otherwise would have been lost in shadows. When this magnificent monument to religious tolerance opened in 1821, it became a natural magnet for leaders and visionaries, including the Marquis de Lafayette, a close friend of Washington, who worshipped here during his triumphant return to the country he had helped to create. St. Elizabeth Ann Bailey Seton, the first United States-born citizen to be canonized. Ralph Waldo Emerson, the prominent writer and philosopher. Mother Mary Elizabeth Lang, founder of the Oblate Sisters of Providence, the first order of African-American women in the world. Father Michael McGivney, founder of the Knights of Columbus, who was ordained in the Basilica. Mother Teresa, now Blessed Teresa of Calcutta, and Blessed John Paul II. Because of its unique history, the Basilica has long been an important meeting place for America's bishops, and is known affectionately as the St. Peter's of North America. Here, church leaders from across the country have dealt with a wide variety of landmark issues, including the development of the Baltimore Catechism, the founding of the Catholic school system, and the support of missions to Native Americans and African American communities. A basilica is a title designated by the Pope to a privileged church of significant spiritual or historic importance. Each year, thousands come to discover and share the details of this unique place. The magnificent altar of reservation, flanked by its two carefully restored angels. The figure of Blessed Teresa of Calcutta, so positioned in the south ambulatory so that it may be touched by the faithful. The bishop's chair, from ancient times the symbol of his teaching authority within the church. And on either side of the sanctuary, the twin ceremonial artifacts that define a basilica. The tintinnabulum in the north ambulatory and the canopeum to the south, both reserved specifically for papal processions. And the great dome itself, culminating in the sculpted dove, symbolic of the Holy Spirit.
It's a great privilege for me to pay tribute to this magnificent building, a shrine to faith and a monument to patriotism. Ever since its restoration and rededication by my predecessor, Cardinal William Keeler, in the year 2006, hundreds of thousands have come from near and far to share the experience of prayer in this uniquely American house of worship, the Basilica of the Shrine of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Come here to worship and be inspired. Come here to share our nation's history. Come here to pray. Closest to him on earth, Mary has been assumed into heaven, body and soul, for all time, continuing to enjoy the fullness of Christ's presence.